What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Nvidia stock, ticker symbol NVDA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Thursday, February 22nd. Okay, well, quite the after hours here for Nvidia. We finished regular trading hours down $19.80 a share, 2.85%. However, here in the after hours, we are up approximately, just a rough estimate here, about 9% here in the after hours, reclaiming hard that $700 a share level. I mean, actually a rather impressive earnings here. You guys know that the majority of these moves lately are happening on guidance. However, just quick little recap here. We got 5.16 on EPS compared to the 4.64 estimate. Revenue, $22.1 billion compared to the estimate of $20.55 billion. Their revenue guidance for the current period, they're saying it's going to be $24 billion. Nvidia's saying that. And the analyst average was $21.9 billion. So in typical Nvidia fashion as of late, another eye-popping result. But let's take a look at the actual levels, because this thing just blew out a lot of likely shorts who entered upon the break of 7. And we were talking about that break, or more so the level itself, a lot in recent coverage here of Nvidia. But let's take a look. Let's start here on the 5-minute chart and take a look at volume. Okay, you guys know I'm a big fan of looking at volume as we make moves and seeing volume changes that correlate with big changes in stock price to gauge market sample size, the big market sample size sentiment. Now, typically I say take after hours movement with a grain of salt because volume is low. However, take a look at this here. We got big increasing volume into the close as Nvidia recovered a little bit into the close today prior to earnings. That's worth noting. You know, big volume on a green surge. You guys know I'm always saying we want to see as much volume as possible on moves that support our bias and as little volume as possible on moves that go against our bias. That goes for whether you're bullish or bearish. Okay, so we had big green volume on that green move into the close. And then we had big, massive green volume on really the majority of this move as we pushed through $700 a share. That was the second largest volume candle as we pushed through 700, obviously not long after the earnings dropped. Nearly 1 million shares on a single 5-minute candle. That is rather impressive in the after hours. Of course, we had the catalyst to make that happen. And breaking 700 on big volume. Remember, contextual, right? After hours, that is big volume. Okay, typically it's almost nothing. Of course, catalyst today drives it higher than the majority of regular trading hours. So for me, this after hours move, just simply based on the volume of it, I'm taking with slightly less of a grain of salt, right? To me, it is a more legitimate move the higher the volume is. Okay, we'll see where we end up on in pre-market tomorrow. But let's move on here now to the 30-minute chart and start taking a look at levels to watch as we head into tomorrow, Thursday. So we look here and you can see we reclaimed not only the 50 period, but also the 200 period on the 30-minute chart. This is what we were talking about yesterday. This is great. You know, ideally tomorrow, what I'm really looking for is that 50 period from a bullish perspective to continue to curl upside, make its way up toward the current stock price as quickly as we possibly can. It's likely to take a little bit of time, but that is the fastest moving, the 50 period on the 30-minute out of really all the 6 different indicators on the 3 different time frames, because you guys know I'm only using the 2 most popular self-fulfilling prophecy indicators on those 3 time frames, the 30-minute, the 4-hour, and the daily, the 50 period and the 200 period. The 50 period on the 30-minute is going to be the quickest moving, and I want to get feet up underneath the move as quickly as possible, right? A psychological barrier to the downside. But given that we can expect that to take a little bit of time, potentially, a couple of days as long as we hang out up in this region, if we see a retest of the 200 period here on the 30-minute, I'm going to want to see that hold, okay, from a bullish perspective. If you are bearish on Nvidia, you know, first of all, I'm sorry the earnings went the way that they did. but Nvidia has been just notorious for blowing out earnings as of late. It's almost like they're never going to stop. You guys know how I feel about this, though. Just a quick little side tangent. Eventually, I think we are going to see a period just across the market, not singling out Nvidia, but across the market. I think we're going to see a period of a season more so of earnings disappointment, maybe 2 quarters, as inflation coming down kind of catches up to these companies and they're no longer able to innovate enough to continue to post more and more impressive numbers, even as the analysts keep upping their expectations. Nvidia's been ahead of the pack for quarter after quarter now, but I do think that's coming. Whether it's later this year or maybe 2025, obviously companies can't continue to grow at a rate like this forever, but Nvidia has been an impressive name in the last 12 months. But anyway, so bears, what I would be looking for if I were you would be breaking downside back below the 200 period and heading back down towards $700 a share, at least here on the 30-minute chart. On the 4-hour, you guys can see that we reclaimed hard that 50 period today after hours, and we actually made a wick down to test that here on the 4-hour, and we held that hard. Again, when things are simple, don't overcomplicate them, right? TA, for me, is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I want to look at the most simple story possible. On the 4-hour chart, the most simple story is a hold of that 50 period. Okay, from a bullish perspective. If we see a retest, I'm going to want to see that hold. And by the way, if you're a bear looking at this, a downside break of the 50 period is what you'd be after to look for a downside test of what really is your goal, 700, a break downside back below 7. Which brings us here to the most important chart of all, which is going to be the daily chart. Okay. This one, the daily oftentimes tells us kind of the biggest story, the real story. The daily chart is the most watched. Here we have the 50-day, and then you go lower, that's the 200-day, the 2 most watched indicators on the most watched chart, on one of the most watched stocks in the world. And you can see that neither of them are really immediately in play. The nearest one is the 50-day, and it's down around 580, actually slightly below 580. So what I'm looking for here, and understand, again, this is the daily chart, so it's not going to show the after hours movement. I mean, the stock here is currently at about 736. So if we zoom in back on the daily, the stock is currently about right here. You know, we are not far away. We're about 10 points off of a test of all-time highs. So the clear story here, 2 things. If I'm a bull, I'm looking for a hold of $700 a share. If we were to see a retest, I absolutely want to see 7 hold. Okay. But my eyes are kind of set on 750. A break and hold of 750 would not only be an all-time high, but it would also be another psychological level conquered. And that could potentially open up a run up toward $800 a share, is really what a lot of bulls are going to be looking for here. Bears, one thing is on your mind. Look for a downside break. Well, let's say 2 things. First of all, look for a downside break of 700, and any test of 750 and or really an all-time high and or 750. Going to want to see that reject if you're bearish on Nvidia. Okay, but really the ultimate goal, if you're a bear right now, is a crack back down below $700 a share. Now, implied volatility. Of course, we did just get earnings, so I would not be surprised if in the next couple of days we see IV fall. Okay. For those of you that have options, just understand that when IV comes down, that's what's called IV crush. IV coming down, that blue line tanking would be your culprit as far as IV crush is concerned. If we end up seeing that, which I would say happens probably 80% of the time after earnings, we see implied volatility fall. It makes a lot of sense, right? The option traders aren't pricing in as much future expected volatility because the volatility catalyst is now over. Just understand that does suck a little bit of value out of your contracts. So in order to make money, you just have to outrun that via the delta move. Of course, we have a large move after hours. So as long as that holds for most call buyers, I would not anticipate that being an issue. But if this move holds, again, for some put purchasers, that might add a little insult to injury if the upside move holds and we also see IV fall. Okay, let's take a look at what the options traders were thinking as we came into earnings. Again, this is from before earnings were reported. So this is heading into tomorrow. We have about 1.5 million total contracts were traded today. 942,000 of those were calls. 604,000 of those were puts, so relatively heavy call side bias, okay? Now, these here, these option bets, the short-term speculators, the 0 to 20 delta range, we had 460,000 calls, 344,000 puts. So we were also seeing a short-term bullish bias here as we came into Nvidia earnings here tonight. And what's also interesting is on every single delta range here, so you have like out of the money, at the money, in the money, which on average is going to be shorter term sentiment, right? More midterm and more longer term. All of those ranges were leaning call heavy. We're leaning to the bullish side, as well as, of course, that overall ratio. So a relatively bullish chain here on Nvidia as we came into earnings here today. In tomorrow's coverage of Nvidia, we're going to take a look back and see what the option traders think after the earnings and see what we have the short-term speculators betting on and, you know, the longer term, the midterm, and get a really well-rounded story after the information is now out. That'll all get priced into the chain tomorrow. So please subscribe to the channel, and I'll be covering Nvidia here every day moving forward. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.